but I hate it here. It's so cold and icky, and the people are mean to me, and I miss my silk.
We don't have time for an intro, so we're starting alphabetically with Dawnstar. Now, Dawnstar doesn't have much history from what I can find. Despite its pretty name, it's not one of the major holds, nor has it ever really been an important location for significant moments of history. It's also not that old a settlement, since it was a fortress in the Second Era, and its destruction led to potentate Viziju Shaye declaring martial law and getting a lot of people killed. This then led to the guilds being formed, like the Fighters Guilds, the Mages Guilds and so on, but I'm not giving Dawnstar all that credit, it was just some random fort at the time. Now, it was a proper town sometime in the Third Era and had a queen called Makala, who married King Thion of Solitude, at least according to the pocket guide to the Empire. The pair went on a bit of a tear, uniting the two city-states and taking land from the Empire in the Sea of Ghosts, like Roscrea and Bleakrock Isle. But this is about as interesting as Dawnstar gets. And it shares this lore with Solitude, which has loads more. Still, I think Dawnstar is a good middle ground area, so I'll give it a 5 out of 10.
I mean, it's alright, like...
Next is Falkreath, which benefits from being an older settlement than Dawnstar, and by old, I mean really old. While we haven't been given a specific date, we know that Falkreath was around during the First Era, because of the Adabale, which talks about a group of early Nords called the Men of Creath, who came from Atmora. Now, Falkreath is traditionally thought as part of Colovia, not Skyrim, so the Men of Creath are believed to be a Colovian tribe, from before the unification of Cyrodiil and the Alessian Empire. The next time we hear of Falkreath is in the Third Era, where King Culhwch enters the picture with a certain general, Talos. This is where their bid to take over Cyrodiil and later all of Tamriel began, and while the story of what actually happened in Falkreath is different depending on whether you believe the orthodox or heresy version of Tiber Septim's history, Falkreath being where it all started helps its case. Still, its history is few and far in between, putting it above Dawnstar at a 6.5 out of 10.
Not bad.
Third, we have Markarth, and now we're getting into the realm of the big boys. Markarth began as a Dwemer city known as... God, who spelled this? Nakand Zel, that's what I'm going with. And like many of the other major cities, you can see Markarth's history in its walls. It was abandoned once the Dwemer disappeared and then taken over by the Reachmen. But when High King Olaf One-Eye came around to expand Skyrim's borders, he took the city and made it a part of his country. Then, once Tiber Septim had set up his empire, he went ahead and made the Imperial College of the Voice in Markarth, hoping to bring back the Way of the Voice as an art in the country. Then we have Markarth's most infamous moment, the Markarth Incident. During the Great War, the Forsworn, aka Reachmen, took control of the city after the Imperial soldiers stationed there were called to fight the Thalmor elsewhere. The Reachmen ruled for 2 years, and when the Great War ended, the city's Jarl enlisted Ulfric's help to retake Markarth, promising him free worship of Talos, which was outlawed by the White Gold Concordant at the time. Ulfric Stormcloak conquered the city, and when the Imperials came back to bring order to Skyrim, they were not allowed in the city unless they too allowed Talos worship. While the Imperials originally agreed, the Thalmor declared that there would be a second Great War if Ulfric and his men were not thrown out and arrested. This eventually became the catalyst to the Skyrim Civil War, and led to the Reachmen being called the Forsworn. Now, I'm skipping over a lot here because the Markarth incident is a massive deal for Skyrim, and it's just one facet of Markarth's lore. So, I'm going to give Markarth a strong 8.5 out of 10. Something in the Second Era would have bumped it up a bit, but it's certainly better than our next entry. Yep, that's right. We're dealing with the Birmingham of Skyrim, Morthal. There's nothing here. It's in a foggy marsh, there's no market, no court mage, and practically no points of interest. There's no smithy, there's no general goods store, and there's no farms. The only interesting part is that it might have been named after Mora House the Manbull, although I couldn't find out why. Mora House is said to be the son of Kain and arrived from Atmora, so maybe this is where he first landed when he arrived in Skyrim. To be honest, I don't really know, but what I do know is that I hate it here, and it has nothing interesting to talk about lore-wise.
I hate coming back to this place.
I mean, Laid to Rest is a kind of cool quest, I guess. No, no, it's just not gonna save Morthal. Morthal is a 1 out of 10.
Support it, you suck.
Next, we'll move on to Riften, which has a history of being burned down and built up again, apparently. It features an ESO a fair bit, being a part of the second Akaviri invasion and the formation of the Ebonheart Pact in the Second Era. Yoren the Scald King is a figure that pops up in Riften, but he's more tied to Windhelm from what I can find, and Riften is a bit of a footnote here. Still, during the interregnum between the Second and Third Cyrodiilic Empires, Riften was destroyed by the resurrected Sinmar the Terrible, a giant killed by Ysgramor and his companions, but with the help of the modern companions who operated out of Fallowstone Hall at the time, Sinmar was defeated. Riften was rebuilt by Thane Veery, who ruled at the time, with the help of the Ebonheart Pact. Then there's a bit about Baron Zia, the Dunmer Princess of Morthal, escaping to Riften where she joined the Thieves Guild. This thieving stint was a short one, since she met the Imperial Commandant Simicas, who took her back to Morrowind. If you know about Tiber Septim's history, you know that Baron Zia is a pretty big part of it, and her short stay in Riften is pretty significant to her meeting the Great General turned Emperor. In the Fourth Era, the city was ruled by Hosgun Crossed Daggers during the Void Knights. He was generally a terrible leader, and his iron-fisted rule eventually led to protests and riots, where the Jarl's castle was burned and the city was destroyed. Again. This is partly why the city is so seedy now, since it wasn't rebuilt to the same level as before Hosgun's rule. All in all, when paired with Riften's interesting state with the clear levels of wealth inequality, corruption, and the Thieves Guild, along with an extensive history, a lot is going on in the Rift's capital. Most of its lore seems to be quite internal compared to somewhere like Markarth, but it's still interesting nonetheless. Riften gets a 7 out of 10.
That's pretty good.
Solitude is next, Skyrim's current capital, and it has so much history. So much. I'm going to have to list rather than go into detail, but Solitude is one of Skyrim's oldest cities, and was a powerful kingdom during the War of Succession between the would-be Nord kings in the First Era. Eventually, Olaf One-Eye, the dude who captured a dragon in Whiterun, won the throne, and Solitude was the last place of opposition. They obviously weren't happy about how the siege went, especially the Bard's College, since there's a tradition where they burn an idol of the old king to this day. Then Solitude became a part of another civil war during the Second Era, where it became the capital of Western Skyrim until Tiber Septim got the Nords on his side. Because Western Skyrim was always more pro-imperial, it ended up becoming the capital for the country as a whole. After that, we have the whole nonsense with Patema Septim, the Wolf Queen, and later Pelagius the Mad, which included Solitude being sacked. Honestly, these events could be a video on their own, so I'm not going to get into them here. But we also have the whole ordeal with King Thion marrying Queen Makala, in a bid to take land away from the Empire, which I touched on in the Dawnstar section. Of course, we also have Ulfric waltzing in and killing High King Torek, worsening the civil war. Solitude is one of Skyrim's most important cities, and its capital for a reason. It has both internal and external affairs and always plays a big part when it comes to any kind of civil war in Skyrim. It does lack a bit of the mythology from the really old cities, but it's got to be one of the most interesting hold capitals around. So Solitude gets a 9 out of 10.
You have made me a happy man.
Following Solitude, we have a place that feels like home, Whiterun, which also has a lot going for it. Its close ties to the Companions means that we know when the city was founded, the Skyforge and Jorvaska coming first after the Stone Eagle monument was discovered by Yonder the Tiny. What a name. From there, the plains of Whiterun would host the Great City. The city would become even greater after Olaf One-Eye used his castle, Dragon's Reach, to capture Numenix, a dragon that had been terrorising Skyrim during the War of Succession. This made Olaf High King, and he then made the Council of Chieftains so that a moot could be called whenever there was a question about succession. Baron Zia even pops up in Whiterun, hiding and staying there with a stable boy called Straw. Who named this kid? Hideo Kojima? Anyway, she would eventually leave for Riften, but her home was actually in the Whiterun Plains, in the old settlement of Darkmoor, which is now called Greymoor Keep. Whiterun also had a witch queen for some reason, who ruled during the Oblivion Crisis. Now, while not having as much as Solitude, Whiterun benefits from its strong ties to Ysgramor and the Companions, with that being the crux of their history. The ties to Olaf One-Eye help too, but its history does feel a little light after those two figures. Still, it's got some super solid lore, even if most of it isn't modern, so I'll give it an 8 out of 10.
Nice.
Now we go to the last of the major holds, Windhelm, which is as old as Whiterun. Ysgramor's son, Ingol, died in the voyage to Skyrim after the 500 companions had been gathered, and once the Snow Elves had been driven out, Ysgramor built Windhelm, and the Palace of Kings would look over his son's burial ground and be a monument to the greatness of mankind. A hell of a thing to dedicate to a fallen child. The city itself was built by elven captives, many of whom died during its construction. And beneath the city was the burial ground of the 500 companions. This was all in the Merethic era, and in the first era, Windhelm officially became the capital of the Kingdom of Skyrim, under High King Harald, the 13th of Ysgramor's line. At the time, Skyrim was more than just a kingdom, but an empire. The first empire of man, in fact. Although the Alessian Empire is usually called the First Empire because of its location in Cyrodiil. Like Solitude, Windhelm has had a lot go on throughout history, and in many ways the cities are like a pair of rivals. When the country split in two, Windhelm was the capital of Eastern Skyrim under Queen Freydis, whose descendants ruled the city for generations, explaining why Windhelm has become a city of rebels and Nord traditionalists. The city would later fall to the Second Akaviri invasion, and the twin brothers, Fildgor Strongprince and Jorun Skaldprince, came to liberate the city. The problem was, their mother, Queen Mabjarn, had been killed during the battle, and Eastern Skyrim needed a new ruler, with the two brothers feuding over the throne. The pair had a traditional Nordic duel, and the 3-hour battle was dubbed the Brothers' War. Eventually, Jorun won, becoming the Skald King and ruler of Eastern Skyrim, while his brother was exiled. Then there's the whole ordeal with Ulfric in the Civil War, which I won't go into. All in all, there's a lot going on in Windhelm, and its geographical location is somewhere a lot of Dummer refugees come to, and its ties to Atmora make it Skyrim's most interesting city from a lore perspective, at least in my opinion. I've skipped over quite a few events here, and there's still so much to talk about, so I'm giving Windhelm a mighty 10 out of 10.
Everything, down to the last minute details.
And at last, we have the only minor hold which can hold a candle to the big boys in terms of lore, Winterhold. To be fair, Winterhold used to be a major hold and was once the country's capital, being allegedly created by the great mage Shalador, who later created the College of Winterhold and the Labyrinthian. The War of Succession, which I've mentioned several times, occurred because of High King Borges' death in Valenwood after the Bosmer used the Wild Hunt. His seat of power was in Winterhold, and his death shattered the realm until Olaf One-Eye took over. When the Second Cyrodiilic Empire took over and Castav Cyrodiil was emperor, Winterhold began a rebellion, in response to Castav forcefully kidnapping Skyrim citizens to fulfill a conscription quota. Castav eventually stepped down, and Remen Cyrodiil II took over, but the rebellion ended when a failed Dragon Guard recruit known as Kalian used powerful magic to sack the city. Remen would later sort this out with a treaty, but this isn't the first time Winterhold suffered near destruction. Prior to the Great Collapse, Winterhold actually had a bit of a resurgence, benefiting from Dunmer migrants who came to study in the college. This didn't last long, with the Nords distrusting magic after the Oblivion Crisis, with many Dunmer returning to Morrowind after the Red Year. This distrust only grew during the Great Collapse, when most of the city collapsed into the Sea of Ghosts, while the college remained untouched. For such a minor hold and a terrible settlement with nothing there, Winterhold has a lot going for it in terms of lore. It's got a rich history, ties Skyrim to Morrowind, and explains the origin of the country's distrust for magic, despite the Nords actually having a storied past using the art. It's a sad city, with an equally sad backstory, and while it doesn't quite have as much as Windhelm or Solitude, as a lover of the ancient Nord stuff, I think it's pretty interesting. So Winterhold gets an 8 out of 10. Yeah! But anyway, thanks for watching. If you've made it this far, feel free to tell me how wrong I am about my rankings, except for Morthal. I'm not hearing it for Morthal. It's awful in every facet. I hate that place.
And so pack was born again as the wolves of Yarbasker, to rule in life and serve in death as the moonlight stars.